Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Benny Mathew, who is the founder of Orion 3. Benny, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
The pleasure's all mine, and pleasure to have you on the show. And I hear about your journey and about the things that you're doing and about your company. I know you're doing a wonderful job with that. Before we get into your journey of your career, could you give us a little background, where you're from, your cultural background, and where you're from?
Yeah, so I was born in South India, so literally the southernmost part of India, a state called Kerala, and I came here when I was 7 years old, December 28th to 1989. And so India is there's a lot of diversity to India, right? So I think a lot of times people think of India as usually people with like the last name Patel or Shah or something like that, and then you have people think that the main that everyone from India practices Hinduism, but the truth is, so I'm from the southern part, and so my family, my great grandparents are all Catholic, very very Catholic, I guess. So just the fact that my last name is Matthew is interesting because people think that it's short for something else or that it was changed, but that's my real background. It's literally just Benny Mathew, nothing fancy, nothing long. And I grew up when we first got here, we lived in a town called Melrose Park, which is about 20 minutes away from the city of Chicago. And even Melrose Park, it's like there's Melrose Park in Maywood. I was like literally right in the middle of that. And it's more of I would say, lower middle class neighborhood, but my family growing up was I would say definitely lower income. So I have a brother and a sister as well, and both my parents, and yeah, that's like the very beginning of the journey.
Now, could you tell us a little bit more about the childhood and like what do you remember the most about it?
Oh man, childhood is interesting because I feel like a lot of people, I definitely have a lot of really good memories from my childhood. But, well, I should say one thing first off. So, I know this is kind of going off a little bit of off topic, but when I was 18 years old, I got into a very, very bad car accident. And I was on a ventilator for multiple days. I literally, almost crossed the threshold of dying. And one of the things I had was a lot of the things before that, I definitely remember it, but it's a little bit different than most people because, for me, everything before the accident, I see it, I remember it, but there's no feeling attached to it. I had a brain injury, so like it was I would think a side effect of that. So I remember everything, so I could talk about it, and I could kind of tell you how I felt, but that's just me looking at that perspective right now. So growing up, it was the neighborhood that I grew up in. There really wasn't any other Indian people, so it was just me. And there was it was a very Italian neighborhood. So when you think about, you hear about the mob in Chicago and all that, Melrose Park was like, I didn't know back then, but Melrose Park was Sicilian Italian, right? And so I didn't really have Indian friends growing up outside of like my cousins, my family, and some people from the church that we went to. So my parents and even my aunts and uncles, they wanted to protect, right? And my parents are new to the country, so they didn't really know exactly what to do, but their friends and their cousins and stuff that were here, I would get advice from them saying, don't hang out with don't hang out with white kids, or don't hang out with black kids, don't hang out with Mexican kids. You go home, you go to school, you study, you come back, and that's it. So in the beginning, especially when I was growing up, there was a lot of, honestly, confusion, I would say, because I didn't want to listen to that. You felt lonely, and well, I felt lonely, I should say. I definitely had friends and stuff, but it was also just a very confusing time for me because when I was very young, like second grade till sixth grade, that's what, like, technically elementary school. I had
Yep.
and I used to get picked on by everybody, the white kids, the black kids,
And
the
it's because of
Mexican
your
kids.
because of your nationality, or because of like something else? You were too smart or something? Or...
No, I mean, I would say it's like a nationality thing, but it's also like I was still new to the country, right? So
True.
even though you adapt, there's certain things that you fully don't understand and your family doesn't do, right? So it was and I but I didn't have like a negative attitude towards that because a part of me thought that was kind of normal, for immigrants. Which, looking back, you're like, that's kind of a fucked up mindset to have. But
Yeah.
and then
I mean,
and then
it's what's in front of you. You know what I'm saying? You're looking at it like, well, the people before me that they're immigrants, they probably were picked on as well. So it's just like I'm just falling in line.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And so the other thing is, a lot of, like, there's an Indian church that we went to, and nice people and all, but I never felt like I fit in there either because most of the people that were there, like the kids who were my age, their parents were like nurses, or like they were like middle class people that lived in like a suburban home or whatever, right? Whereas me, we lived in this tiny little one bedroom apartment, so it was like there was a little bit of shame in that too, just being poor. But my parents are my heroes. Like, they worked their asses off. They just never had the education to do a lot more than they did. But so when I got to sixth grade, I moved to a different school, still in Melrose Park, but it was more like a junior high. And I think that was definitely, at first it was hard because I didn't know anybody there. But after that it became really, you get used to it. But I felt like my crowd that I hung out with were the people that played basketball and listened to rap, because I loved rap music, right? And even though my parents would try to beat my ass every time I would like put the music on, and so it ended up being like, I would say up until like sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, the guys I hung out with mostly were black. So yeah, it wasn't when I think about my childhood right now, I think there was a lot of insecurities that were probably started then that literally, I still held on to for years and years and years and years and years. And I think that came from just feeling like a guest. I think I told this to Greg before. I honestly felt, even though I loved America from the first year that I got here and whatnot, I loved it, but I never felt like I was an American. And it probably wasn't until I was like in my early 20s, man, that I actually felt like, okay, I am an American. And I think to add on to that, so 1989 was the last year where if you came to the country as an immigrant with a green card, you didn't need, like, your green card didn't expire. So when I was, so I never even got my U.S. citizenship until I was like early 20s, or late 20s for that matter, because I never really went out of the country,
Yeah.
And I didn't really even think about it like that. Like, that wasn't even something that I was thinking about, because until like the company that I was working at, I think it was 2011 actually. I was always in sales and business development. So when you hit your goals, you have like this incentive trip that all the people that won go on. And I get to Mexico. Well, first of all, I go to my parents' house to get my papers, right? Like my passport and all that. I'm like, holy crap, this green card has a picture of me when I was literally 7 years old, you know, and so coming back to the U.S. when I went to Mexico it was fine, but coming back to the U.S. like, hey, we need you to come to the back, and like I was like, oh shit, what? Okay, this is not. I seen this on TV, but this is not going to go good. Luckily, like, I wasn't like interrogated or anything. It was maybe like 10, 15 minutes and I was able to go free. But literally right after that, I said, okay, I'm getting my citizenship. And, but yeah, so I think along with the childhood insecurities and I guess not having a U.S. passport, even though I never cared about my passport, there was just a lot that I just didn't feel like I was an American until my late 20s.
So in a question I would ask you at this point in time, like with all that you just mentioned, like how did that affect you in a positive way? Like how did you walk out of it like, all right, okay, from being bullied, from not fitting in to, all these things, like how do you walk out of that in a positive light?
My entire life, the best, even though there was people that I would never, that definitely showed hate towards me, I had some of the best thing about my life is the people that come into it, man. So like for every bully that was there, I would say, I've had maybe, for every one of those, I probably had 20 like really, really good people from all different backgrounds that came into my life. And my mom, like she worked 2 jobs, man, as a CNA making like dog shit. And she, barely a little bit over minimum wage really. Right. And then I saw that and I was like, she was there's no way I could fail in life because I saw what she was doing. And she would come home and cook for my brother and sister and me, and everything about like work ethic. That's where I learned it from. And it was hard because even when you're especially like in the 90s, when you're out and I feel like there was so much more, even though social media and TV makes you think otherwise, I felt like there was a lot. I felt like America was a lot more racist back then, but I think it was because people just didn't know yet, right? It was still, I mean, literally every black person that you saw on TV was either a gangster, a rapper, or something derogatory, right? Like something that
True.
is stereotypical, I would say.
Yeah, I get you.
Every Indian person was like a cab driver or a convenience store guy with an Indian accent, which it was so annoying to see on TV. So yeah, it was just I feel like it was a different world, but I don't know. I mean, I was so grateful for the opportunities in this country and the friends that I had made in this country, and there was no way like I was going anywhere else except for here.
Now I know you have your bachelor's degree in human resources management, right? So like fast forwarding right from your earlier childhood to now you're into college, right? Now why'd you major in that? And what was the process of like finding your first job out of there?
So when you're most Indian people go into medicine, computers, like technology, software, IT, finance, accounting, and all that. And I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want anybody to tell me to do that because when I was in high school, I had to figure out a way to go to college. So, I mean, I started working when I was 15. I would save every dime because my parents obviously couldn't afford to. And I took out some loans and got some grants too. So I made it to college. When I got to college, I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so like I was in the business school at Northern, and like I said, my parents, they worked really hard, but they never really got to move up or anything because they didn't have an education. And I know that like they were not treated right at work. And so I realized like human resources is all about the legal side. And so I never wanted my parents to get bullied again, or I wanted to be able to protect them. So I didn't really give a shit about being an HR person for a company. I just wanted to understand the legal side of it. And so, and I'll also be very transparent. I didn't really, I didn't really learn a lot in classes in college. But the HR classes that I took I was very focused because I wanted to learn that. And that's why I picked that as a major.
Okay, okay. And did you, when you got your first job out of there, like, did you feel like it was rewarding?
Yeah. I mean, my first job out of college, I was there, I ended up being there for 12 years. And I would not have got that job unless if it wasn't for my friend who
And
got a
what
job there because he
the company?
Aerotech. Aerotech.
Yes. So yeah, that's when you started your career at Aerotech. I saw that in your bio. You were, and I believe in you were a business development manager. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So that
Mm.
was you start out as a recruiter and then you kind of move up, right? That's the way Aerotech was. And so I got the job there to be a recruiter. It's a recruiting company. And then I just really liked I thought it was a cool vibe, and I really liked the environment that, like it was a lot of young people right out of college, fun, social, all that, and very, very, very long hours and things like that. So, but I ended up getting promoted. I want to say right before it was 2 years, and then after that, it was like I just stayed there because I got a lot of different opportunities to do different things with them, and I didn't feel like I was. There was a lot of challenges, but I felt like
It was
the
the
people
place.
that I was working with was the biggest differentiator. I felt like the culture was great, the people were great,
Hmm. And that
and
sometimes
so
keeps
that's what I
people at a
wanted.
company. That would definitely
Yep.
keep somebody at a company, especially when you graduate from college. You're like you're hitting the ground running. You know, you sometimes you're bouncing from company to company, but you find something you're like, oh, this is nice little home. I like the energy. I like the environment. I like the people around me. So obviously, you stay there for some time. Like, could you tell us a little bit more about like what does a business development manager do?
Yeah, so Aerotech is a recruiting company. So it's actually the biggest recruiting company in the country, and they're a privately held company. What they do is they recruit for other companies. Like, for example, if you needed an engineer, a quality control person, like there's all these different divisions. So, well, I started there as a recruiter. So I was reporting to a sales manager who would be the one dealing with, let's say, the operations manager of a manufacturing company. And he would be the one that's in charge of building that relationship and then getting us an opportunity to fill a position for that company. And then I would be the one recruiting on it. So that's how it started. And then when you do well in that, and if you can prove you can manage people and do the sales side, then you get promoted to an account manager. And then at that point, I'm the one that's doing the sales side. And then you start off with having maybe one person working for you, and as you build your book of business, you have to promote the people that are recruiting for you into sales roles, and then you gotta you gotta hire new people to work for you so you can build your business and then promote them. So it's a really interesting model, but I think I became
It
a
worked for
company
you.
guy.
Yeah, it worked for you.
Yeah,
You
I mean, it was
stayed there. Like, what was like the
yeah.
first lesson that you learned working in corporate structure? You know, that school didn't prepare you for.
Um, the first thing that I had to understand was that I I needed to just listen and learn, and that college did not prepare me for this at all. Like meaning like school wise, right? So I realized that I think you have to the corporate is so different because like you have to figure out how the political side of things, right? You have
True.
to figure
Yeah.
out the right way to
The
communicate.
dynamics of that. That's a very hard thing, especially if you're coming from a different country, you're coming into a different environment, different culture. You have to kind of get to know it in order to make those moves up that ladder.
Yeah, I think I didn't like I said, like I don't, none of my family was in corporate before, so I didn't know really exactly the political landscape and how to navigate through, but I had to figure it out. And I think, there was a part of me that definitely felt like I was back in Melrose Park again, where I was the only Indian person, and which is fine. I was fine with that because I was used to that most of my life. And then I would say, um, but I was also probably, one of two people of color there at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really understand why, but then I realized that's because Most of the people that started working there, they knew what sales was in corporate America, right? Whereas me being raised Indian, sales was kind of looked down on as like a used car salesperson, or I didn't know anything about corporate sales, right? And then but I learned from my time at Aerotech what sales is, and there was a point where when I think it was like 2011 and all that. As the company grew and as I started to continue to do well, there was a diversity and inclusion board that the company had. Mind you, this is at that point, it's like a $7 billion company. And so I was like, you know what? I want to do that because I think we could hire good salespeople that are not typical white males or females, right? So that was a huge learning curve for me because I went to so many different job fairs, all to like recruit internally, like so many different organizations that focus on recruiting recruiting for different ethnic groups, and really sales was the one that I could not really find a good pipeline of people from. And that's when I realized, I was like, then I started to think, why is that? And then you start kind of going backwards and you realize that, well, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the people who were selling insurance, stocks, whatever you want to call it, right? Like everything was white males. And so they got the fruits of that reward. Like they knew like the reward that you get in sales. So when they have kids, then, they're going to college and whatnot, those kids already know like sales, right? Go into sales and this is how you move up. So I realized like there is definitely, there's a gap there, that I think not just Indian, but like I think all people of color can learn to do like as we move forward. And now as there are more, more people that grew up in America that see the different facets of corporate America, I feel like then now that people my age who have kids, they might tell their kids, okay, you know what, actually take this course, go to this, like get into a company, start in sales, and you can work your way up or you can make money. It's strictly based on performance and merit. So, yeah, I mean, I just think in Chicago, especially, they're just, I barely had any luck finding any people of color, especially Indian, that wanted to do sales.
Now, a question I wanted to ask you, like when you worked in HR and staffing, like you dealt with a lot of clients, like what do you think is the number, like one quality to possess when you're engaging with several clients, and why?
Listen, I think like when you're in sales and you're trying to help the client find the right employee, I think the number one thing you need to do is like you have to listen to what your client says. And I think that you have to, like, the thing with like a recruiting company is like you're the middle person, right? Because you have you have the candidate that's looking for the job or that wants a job, and you have the company that wants to hire the right person for the job. And although everything may look right on paper, it doesn't mean it's the right fit. It's not the right fit mutually. So then you have to be able to listen to what both the candidate wants and what like the client at the company wants. And then you have to make sure you're not going to get like 100% match. You got to make sure that it's as close as possible.
True. Now, obviously, I'm glad to have you on with us today because of, the audience is always asking us for tips on how to be better noticed by recruiters. That's a big thing, because of software and recruiting, going through 1,000 applications a day. Like what is some of the things you could advice you could give, tips?
Well, I think, the job market is always changing, right? And you mentioned technology, that's a big component of it. But I think if you're looking for a job, I think, you got to get a little creative if you want to stand out, because now with the technology that's out there, if a company posts a job, they could have literally 1,000 applicants within, 2 days.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at that, you might think that's a good thing for the company, but it's really not, because the HR person that's like screening out those resumes, like a vast majority of those resumes are not people that are qualified for the job. Right. So the whole thing is like, depending on the type of role you're going for, you want to stand out. The good thing is there's technology right now that you can use where you can get visibility from hiring managers. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. I use it a lot, especially right now, probably more than ever. And I think if you really want to work for a company, you want to do your due diligence. And if you're applying for a job, look at who you're reporting to and, find them on LinkedIn, maybe, connect with them before you send your resume in, engage with their posts, send an email.
True.
Hell, I
Yeah.
still think,
Yeah.
sending
Yeah.
it. I think all that stuff, you got to be creative. And I think a lot of people don't do that. And then they don't get the results that they want. You know what I mean?
And you're right about that. Some people look at it as an extra step, like they just give me the job, but it's 2022 now. You got to do a couple more things in order to get that ideal job. And like you said, work your way up. Some people kind of forget that, and I know that's a very hard thing to do when it comes down to like applying to company after company. And do you feel it's essential to have a recruiter?
You mean to work with, like if you're a candidate and you're,
yeah.
I don't know if it's essential. I would say, actually, this day and age, I would say it probably is. And again, it depends on the roles that you're going for. So especially for professional roles, but I think there are, I don't even know what it is now, but back in 2017, the recruiting industry in just the US was over $160 billion just in the US.
Wow.
So that just shows you that recruiting is by far the most broken system in corporate America, in my opinion. Because when you're someone now some companies have like really good recruiting teams and set processes and all that, but most companies don't. And most people that are in HR, they start out as recruiters as like the entry level job at a company. Right. So if you're working really hard to get to the next step, right, and that's what you want to do, I don't know how much you're going to be able to focus on this element throughout the whole process, right? Because you're probably going to be, once you get really good, you're going to get promoted. So that's like the company aspect of it. And then you're a candidate looking for a job. So, I mean, human resources is human beings, right? That's a first word of it. And I think that the humanity in human resources as it relates to recruiting is horrible.
And you mentioned the word entry level, and this is something that I know our listeners are going to tune in deeply for. This is like, what advice would you give to like an immigrant professional, who's qualified for a job, right? A lot of individuals, traveling to the U.S. they've been working very hard. They obviously graduated from a university from where they're coming from within their country, but they're afraid to apply because they're afraid they're going to be assigned to like an entry level position. Like they went from being in a top sales or a top director position, but then obviously coming to the US, now they're being demoted in a sense. Like, what advice would you give for that?
Well, I think there's a say. I'm not a big fan of like reciting cliches or what common phrases, but people say like your network is your net worth, right? And I do believe that. I think like the more relationships that you build, the more access you have. So it's funny because when I was talking to Greg, I brought him up, but I have a friend who came here from Haiti when he was in high school, graduated, did not want to go to college, but he fell in love with tech, right? So the tech industry in Chicago, the tech scene is really good. I think we're like the third biggest market now. So he didn't want to go to college, but he knew he wanted to be a founder. So what he did was he went on LinkedIn, he went on, the different social media platforms. He got names of different venture capital people, different CEOs, founders. And this is when he was probably 18 or 17 years old. And he started to just reach out to them and said, hey, my name is, and I'm looking for, I want to be a founder. I'd love to just get to know the industry. Would you have some time? Can I talk to you and get some advice from you? And the thing is, like, people were very, very helpful to him. He built his first company when he was like 18. Then he, it didn't work out exactly as he had planned. And then eventually, like, it got to the point where he's like, okay, maybe I do need to work for someone and learn, right? But what he was doing, just that aspect of just reaching out to people, right? and getting to know them and just trying to pick their brains on what he should do. So when he started looking for jobs at, with a lot of these tech companies, like, I mean, he was turning down a lot of offers. And now he's he's only 25 years old, but he does better than most people in their 40s. So
shout out to that. Shout out to the young man. Good job.
Yeah, man. And a Haitian immigrant, right? Exactly like Greg. So
no, that's a good story right there.
Out. Yeah, I think you have to make sure you stand out, because I know people that I think there's, especially back in the day, people didn't respect degrees or experience from other countries, but I think that has changed. I think people do respect it now,
True. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I would say, but in terms of advice, I would tell people that I know it can be nerve-wracking. I know it can be scary. I know you can get a lot of different perspectives, but put yourself out there, reach out. Most people want to help, especially if you tell them, hey, I moved here from, company X or country X. This is my background. I really want to get into this field. I just want to pick your brain on, what you're doing in your role right now here in the US, because I do think people want to help. I get at least a couple times a month people that reach out to me on LinkedIn and say something like that, where they're not trying to sell me anything. They either follow me on LinkedIn.
Start that conversation. And you mentioned something about standing out, and I like that's a key word that a lot of our guests have talked about, like standing out and standing out in an organic way, right? Making sure that the connection is there. Now, a question I had to ask you, like after you left Aerotech, like where'd you go after that, and like how did that come about?
I went to Baker Tilly, which is a huge CPA firm, public accounting firm, similar to like a Deloitte or Ernst & Young, but Baker Tilly is obviously a lot smaller because those companies are huge. And it was, I use the word serendipity for my life, because a lot of it is where I just kind of, things happen, I just kind of pay attention to it, and I pursue it, so somebody had reached out to me from there, and I didn't even know what Baker Tilly was, and all of a sudden I get a call or a message on LinkedIn or something, and it ended up being, because I was living in downtown Chicago, and it ended up being like a 5-minute walk. So I was
that's even better.
I was like, this is crazy, because I was driving an hour and a half each way before that. But I didn't. Yeah, I mean, the drive wasn't the only reason, but it was also because at Aerotech, I felt like the company was growing a lot and they were doing a lot of different things, and I had no hard feelings or anything, but the way I was going, it didn't really align, so I needed to change. So and then Baker Tilly happened, and I ended up getting an offer, and I took it.
Okay. Now, from your experience, I mean, obviously you were in corporate America for significant amount of time, right? But from your experience, like what do you think is the biggest challenge an immigrant faces working in corporate America, in your perspective?
Oh man, that's I think the sense of belonging, right? Not having a sense of belonging is really hard, right? Especially like if you're an immigrant and you're at a company and you just don't feel welcomed by it. You could have the best technical skills or whatnot, but if you don't feel welcomed by the company, you're not going to be the best version of yourself. So I think, and I know everyone's personality is different, but whether you're shy or you're very extroverted, I would make it a point to get to know your coworkers.
That's essential.
Yeah, and depending on like I don't have an accent, right? So when people see me, they don't think I was born in India because I don't have an accent per se, right? But I will say there's some people that come from India or other countries where they almost don't feel, and I know this just from people I've talked to, like they don't feel like they can carry on a conversation in a group or anything like that because they get insecure about their accent, right? But I think group settings are a lot different than one-on-one settings, especially nowadays, like with Zoom and the phone and meeting up in person. Like you can literally have a one-on-one conversation with your coworkers, with your with your managers, whatever. Because I think relationships are extremely important in corporate America. And as long as if you and three other people have the same skill set and the same level of performance, the one that's going to get the promotion is the one that has the relationships.
That is correct. That's correct. Now, I know when you talk about relationships, like what type of those relationships that you had from your first company to your second company, it got you all the way to opening your company right now. Like you're the founder of your company. Could you tell us a little bit more about your company and the mission?
Well, I could tell you, my Orion 3 is something that, I don't have an elevator pitch for people. It's actually the complete opposite of everything that I was taught to do in corporate America, because this is something that came accidental almost during COVID, because there's a lot of things that I learned about. I learned so much in the two companies I worked at. I've had some incredible people that are still that are actually, I'd say most of my close, good friends are all people that I somehow, some way met through work and all that, right? I've also met a lot of shitheads. I've also met a lot of people that were complete assholes. I've met people that didn't give a damn or wanted to see me fail, right? But just like when I was a kid growing up and you asked me, like, what made you, love America or like America? It was always like for every bad person, there was always more good people, right? So during COVID, I felt like, we were, especially living in downtown Chicago, we were completely taken away from everything, the social energy that kept us all going. And that's when I realized the value in authenticity. And to not go on a long tangent, my whole thing is, I think there's something about the concept of serendipity that has actually played a huge role in my life. And I don't know how life would have been like if it wasn't for the right people that came along. So for me, it's like, I think there's something to serendipity, which is, meeting the right people at the right time for the right reason. And so you have people, purpose, and timing, right? And I think timing is something that we don't think about, because a lot of times I think the universe kind of gives you the solutions, but your eyes aren't open to it, right? And I think that so the company is strictly based on the definition, the meaning of serendipity. So I use the words literally. Whenever people ask me what is it, I say, well, Orion 3, the purpose is to create conscious serendipity. And people look at me like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, the whole concept is to control the timing of interactions within specific people so that those interactions lead to authentic relationships.
Okay. I like how you broke that. That definitely was a lot easier to digest right there. I think that's a great thing. I mean, like you said, timing, purpose, people, bringing all those people together. Now, I know that you did bring some people together in an event. You recently had an event about like immigrant experience in corporate America. What were like the biggest takeaways from that panel?
Well, that was it was someone that was an immigrant from Turkey, and then someone that was an immigrant from India. Both of them one's a CFO, the other is a CEO, and they're both from they both have completely different experiences, right? I think it was really interesting to hear that the woman who is from Turkey, she has blonde hair, light eyes, but so when you see her, you think she's an American, right? Like a white woman. But when you hear her talk, you start to hear a little bit of an accent. Then you realize like she's actually Muslim, and she talked about her experience in corporate America, and she's worked all over the world. And it's like the bullshit that she had to deal with, because sometimes people don't realize that she's Muslim from Turkey, and so there is such a thing as like Muslim hate, right? And so some of the things that she had to hear from other people speaking when they had no idea she was Muslim. It's like,
can't judge a book by its cover now.
Right. That's and then the other woman, she's a she was a tech founder who had a huge exit, and now she's the CEO of a pretty big company. When she was building her first company, she went to Silicon Valley from Chicago like probably 10 times to raise money, and nobody would give her money. And I think the 10th time, it was the 9th or 10th time that she went, it was an older man that basically told her flat out, well, you're a short little brown girl with a funny accent. You're not going to get any money from Silicon Valley. So hearing that, that's like detrimental and devastating. But and most people would have just, they probably would have thrown the towel in at that point. But she persevered, and she said, fuck that. I'm going to do what I want to do. I want to build this. I believe in this. And she ended up figuring out, she ended up getting clients before she even ended up making a product that was pharmacies. And her clients believed in her more than any of those people that she was asking for money with. And she ended up like having her clients be her first seed investors. And, after 4 or 5 years, she ended up growing that company international and ended up having a huge exit.
One thing I really appreciate you, Benny, doing is really expressing your journey, but also talking about other people's journey as you have gone through your journey. I really appreciate that. And I know that we're coming up on this last question. I wanted to just ask you, like, what are like some of your last words or some thoughts that you could give away to our listeners? I greatly appreciate you like just expressing these stories and talking about how you felt like not a part of something, but then you became a part of something and now you built your own thing. Like it just shows your persistence in you as an individual. And I like how you said the people, purpose, and timing, those 3 things are essential, and just making those connections, organic connections, in which a lot of our guests have talked about on the show. But any last words for our listeners?
Yeah, I think whether you're an immigrant, man, woman, black, white, whatever, I think the most important skill set that you can have is always achieving a higher level of self-awareness every year. There's no finish line to it. I think that creates confidence, that creates clarity of thought, and that helps you understand who you are and what you want to do. That is by far the biggest thing I'll tell everyone, because there's, the world literally the last few years can flip upside down, right? And we don't have a lot of control over what happens externally, but we have 100% control over how we react to those things that happen externally. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to dictate who we are. We all have, every single human being has different ups and downs that they've gone through in their lives. And you may think one person's struggles were not that bad, but the truth is you don't know the level that those things have affected that person. You know what I mean? Like, so I think self-awareness, achieving a high level of that helps you become more empathetic. And I also think that I could live anywhere else in the world right now if I really want to, but I love America. I think it is the best country in the world. And I think this is the place that everyone still wants to come to. Yeah, we got some shit that's happening that's like really fucked up, but I think that, that's part of the human experience. So,
well, yeah, I appreciate that, but I thank you for dropping them gems today on the show. I greatly appreciate you again with the story and your journey and sharing other people's stories as well too. I know they'll be very happy to hear that their stories were influential in this journey today. But I want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear any more inspirational stories like Benny, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcast.